Hello, English learners. Welcome back to English Pods. Today, we are exploring an essential topic that can take your language skills to the next level: building vocabulary. Expanding your vocabulary is one of the best ways to improve fluency, express yourself more confidently, and better understand native speakers. In this episode, we'll dive into useful words, phrases, and techniques that make learning new vocabulary easy and enjoyable. So, get comfortable and get ready to boost your language skills. Let's jump right in.
All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Time for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling a topic I know a lot of you are eager to explore, building vocabulary for English learners.
Definitely a crucial skill for anyone mastering the language.
We've got some great sources lined up for this, and I have to say, they've got some pretty interesting ideas on how to really make those words stick.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll get into the why behind those methods too, not just what works, but the science behind it. I think you'll find it fascinating.
I'm already intrigued. So, let's see, looks like we've got flashcards, watching English content, putting those new words into sentences, all that good stuff.
Yeah, a good mix of classic and more, shall we say, unconventional approaches.
Okay, so first off, watching English movies, shows, even documentaries, all that fun stuff. Some sources even specifically recommended those nature documentaries narrated by David Attenborough.
You know, that's actually a great point. It's like learning while enjoying those soothing sounds of nature.
Exactly. Makes it a lot less like studying and a lot more like, well, just chilling out. But how does simply watching something, even if it's in English, actually help us learn new words?
Well, it's all about what one source called passive exposure. Basically, you're immersing yourself in the rhythm and flow of the language. It's like absorbing the soundscape, even if you don't catch every single word at first.
So it's more about getting a feel for the language, almost like how a baby learns before they can even speak.
Yeah, there's definitely a parallel there. And speaking of babies, they learn a lot through visual cues too, which brings us to subtitles.
Ah, yeah, subtitles. That makes sense. It's like having those visual aids to connect the sounds with the actual words.
Exactly. And there's a great tip from the St. Giles source. They suggest you jot down any unfamiliar words that catch your eye while you're watching and then look them up later.
Oh, I like that. It's like
Yeah.
a personal vocabulary treasure hunt.
Right. And to really make it stick, try using that new word in conversation the same day.
Oh, now that's a challenge. But I love it. I'm all about turning learning into a game. And speaking of games, I see we've got flashcards up next. Gotta admit, those were my go-to back in the day. Still are sometimes.
Ah, flashcards, the classic. They
Oh.
definitely have their place. But the top university source emphasized that it's not just about memorizing definitions.
Yeah, I can see that. Just knowing what a word means doesn't necessarily mean you know how to use it.
Precisely. You've got to delve deeper, look up synonyms, check out example sentences, really understand the word's nuances and how it fits into different contexts.
So it's like not just knowing a definition, but knowing how to actually use the word.
Exactly. It's like learning a tool. You need to know not just what it is, but how to handle it. You know what I mean? And that actually ties in nicely with watching English content.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. So
Mm.
if you come across a word on a flashcard and then you hear it being used naturally in a show, it's like, boom.
Exactly. It clicks. And don't underestimate the power of visual association either. The St. Giles source suggested labeling everyday items around your house with their English names.
Uh-huh. That's a great idea.
Might seem silly, but it works. That visual reminder can really reinforce the learning.
I can see myself now walking around my apartment, slapping labels on everything: refrigerator, door, plant, maybe even caffeinated beverage instead of just plain old coffee. But I'm guessing simply recognizing words isn't enough. We need to actually use them.
You got it. And in part two, we'll delve into exactly that, how to take those words and really make them your own, weaving them into sentences, both written and spoken. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're ready to take those new words and actually start using them.
That's right. Time to put them into action. But before we jump into full-blown sentences, I have to ask about something that always throws me off when learning a new language: idioms and slang. They're like the secret code of fluency.
You're absolutely right. Mastering idioms and slang can definitely feel like you're unlocking a whole new level of understanding.
Exactly. They add so much color and personality to the language.
And they help you connect with native speakers on a deeper level.
So how do we crack this code? Any secret decoder rings involved?
Well, not a decoder ring exactly, but one of the best ways is to immerse yourself in authentic English content.
Like those movies and TV shows we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Pay attention to how the characters use language in casual conversations, how they really talk. You'll start picking up on common idioms and slang organically.
So it's like training your ears to recognize those expressions in their natural habitat.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to take notes. If you hear an idiom you don't understand, jot it down, look it up later.
Great tip.
Even better, ask a native speaker to explain it, how it's used in different contexts.
So context is key here. It's not just about memorizing a list of idioms, but understanding how they fit into real conversations.
Absolutely. And here's another layer to consider: cultural background. One of the sources highlighted that the meaning of an idiom can be deeply rooted in a particular culture or historical event. Understanding those roots adds another level of depth to your language learning.
It's like each idiom has its own backstory, its own unique flavor. That makes learning them so much more interesting.
Exactly. It turns language learning into a cultural exploration. And once you've started to grasp those idioms and slang terms, well, then it's time to.
Put them into practice. I have to admit, though, it can feel a little intimidating at first.
I hear you.
Like, what if I use an idiom incorrectly and end up sounding totally awkward?
Oh, that's a common fear for sure. But remember, mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. The key is to not let that fear hold you back from speaking.
Yeah.
Think of it like learning to ride a bike. You're going to wobble a bit at first, but with practice, you'll be cruising along confidently.
So it's about embracing those wobbly moments
Mhm.
and not being afraid to experiment with new expressions.
Exactly. And start small. You don't have to jump into using complex idioms right away.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Begin by incorporating simple ones into your daily conversations. Order your coffee using slang. Ask for directions with an idiom. Those small victories will build your confidence.
I love that. And as we gain more confidence, it's important to remember that practice makes perfect, right?
Absolutely. Consistent practice is key. And one source had a fascinating suggestion: don't just practice with native speakers, practice with fellow language learners too.
Oh, interesting. So other people who are also learning English.
Exactly. Each interaction, no matter who it's with, offers unique opportunities to learn and grow.
That's a great point. Makes sense. We can all learn from each other's experiences.
And encourage each other along the way. And of course, we can't forget about the amazing language learning resources available online.
Yeah, true. There are so many apps and online communities where you can connect with other learners from around the world.
It's like having a global network of language partners right at your fingertips.
So, with all of this in mind, as we move on from part two and wrap up this section on putting our vocabulary into action, is there anything else we should keep in mind as we embark on this exciting journey?
Okay, so we've talked about expanding our vocabulary, even dove into the world of idioms and slang. But now it's time for I guess you could say, the main event: mastering the art of, actually having a conversation in English.
Absolutely right. It's time to put those words together, create some magic. But like any art form, it takes practice and a willingness to uh, embrace those learning moments along the way.
I'm definitely up for the challenge. But I have to admit, sometimes I kind of freeze up when I'm trying to speak. It's like my brain knows what it wants to say, but my tongue just, I don't know, has a mind of its own.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's
Yeah.
really common. And one of the sources actually offered a surprisingly simple tip for this. Focus on, get this, active listening.
Active listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds counterintuitive, right? But being a good listener can actually make you a better speaker.
Okay, I'm curious. How did that work? Well, when you really listen to someone, you're not just hearing their words, you're absorbing their tone, their body language, all those little nuances. And that helps you understand the flow of conversation, pick up on those subtle cues, formulate a more, I guess you could say, a more thoughtful response.
It's like becoming a conversational detective, looking for clues in every word and gesture.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions. It shows you're engaged, that you're genuinely interested. Plus, it buys you a little extra time to process the information and come up with your response.
That takes some of the pressure off having to have the perfect answer ready to go instantly. But what about the fear of, you know, making mistakes? I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels self-conscious about saying the wrong thing.
Oh, definitely not. That's a super common fear. But one of the sources had a great reminder: mistakes are inevitable, especially when you're learning a new language. They're not something to be ashamed of, they're stepping stones on the path to fluency. It's all about shifting your perspective, seeing them as valuable learning opportunities.
It's like embracing those oops moments and using them to grow, kind of like a scientist conducting experiments, right?
Yeah, exactly. And practice, of course. Practice makes progress. The more you speak, the more confident and fluent you'll become. And, don't be afraid to start small. One of the sources suggested just focusing on mastering simple phrases and everyday interactions at first.
Like ordering a coffee, asking for directions, making small talk with a cashier, that kind of thing.
Yep. Those everyday exchanges give you a chance to practice your speaking skills in a low pressure environment. And each little victory, it builds your confidence, empowers you to take on more and more challenging conversations.
It's like building a conversational muscle, one small interaction at a time.
Right. And one source, this one was interesting, suggested practicing speaking with both native English speakers and fellow language learners.
So talking to both native speakers and like other people who are also learning English.
Exactly. Each type of interaction brings its own unique benefits.
Makes sense. You get to hear the language spoken naturally by native speakers and also have that like supportive environment with other learners.
Right. You can experiment, try new things, make mistakes without feeling judged. Plus, you learn from each other, share tips, and, encourage each other along the way.
It's like a language learning support group. And speaking of support, we can't forget all the amazing resources online.
Oh, absolutely. From language exchange apps to online communities, there's a whole world of opportunities out there to connect with other learners and practice those conversation skills.
It really is like having a global network of language partners right at your fingertips. So, as we wrap up this whole deep dive, this exploration of building English vocabulary and really mastering the art of conversation, I guess, the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say the key is be patient with yourself, embrace the learning process, and most importantly, have fun with it. Learning a language should be an enjoyable journey, a journey of exploration and discovery.
So well said. It's not about reaching perfection overnight. It's about making consistent progress and, celebrating each milestone along the way.
Exactly. So keep learning, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep having fun with the English language. You got this.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. We hope you enjoy the journey and feel inspired to keep building your English vocabulary and mastering the art of conversation.